On the issue of our climate crisis, we are currently at what I would say is a boiling point, not just in terms of the actual effect on the climate, but also in terms of our conversation about it. Lots of people are paying attention to this right now. There's the very real chance that if the 2020 election goes the right way, significant action could finally be taken. And so what we have been doing here at the Damage Report is profiling some of the young activists who have been helping to get us to this point. It's been very long, hard fought throughout this year, pushing for a Green New Deal for politicians who are gonna take this issue seriously. And so that effort continues today. We're joined by Zina Rodriguez, activist with the Sunrise Movement. Zina, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. So tell me a little bit about this year, about working with the Sunrise Movement. There are a lot of groups that have been involved in this effort, but obviously Sunrise Movement has been one of the most important, one of the most influential since the most recent push started late last year. What has that experience been like for you?
Well, it's been absolutely a whirlwind. Ever since November, when we sat in at Pelosi's office, all of a sudden we were at the center of the debate when it came to climate change and climate politics. So I joined on the team full time in June, and right away off the bat, we knew that we were going to be pushing for the Democratic candidates to be having a climate debate. And so I joined team, I went to boot camp, and about 2 weeks in, I was sleeping outside of the DNC headquarters in Washington, D.C., demanding that the DNC sanction a climate debate and commit to holding one. And that was an entire process in itself. We gained victory. We had 2 different forums on a climate debate, and now we're going straight into striking and mobilizing millions of people to disrupt business as usual and force our politicians to take climate action. So it's been quite a journey.
It certainly has, and as you pointed out, there have been some great successes along the way. Originally, there weren't going to be any climate-focused events in this debate. Now there have already been multiple. There are likely to be more. Here at TYT, we're helping to organize one right now. But I'm curious, considering your acknowledgement of the crisis we're facing, your expectations in terms of what needs to be done, what you've seen at these town halls, would you say that overall you're fairly confident that whoever we end up with through this primary, if they become president, that you can trust them on this issue?
I don't think so. I don't think so far we have all the information and commitment and demonstration that we have a candidate who is prepared to fight for the Green New Deal, but we are happy with all the candidates that have been sort of framing their climate plans around the Green New Deal. And ultimately, we're going to trust the candidates that's the most committed and capable of passing a Green New Deal. Mm-hmm. And so that means laying out an ambitious plan and having the political will to achieve it. Specifically, Bernie, we totally appreciate his plan. It's the most aggressive and comprehensive plan, and it grasps the challenge while recognizing the opportunity we have to transform our economy. But he hasn't committed to abolishing the filibuster. So that's a little challenging there, because how can we, trust a candidate to pass the Green New Deal if they don't necessarily have the political will to achieve it? We don't know what the Congress is going to look like in 2020. Hopefully it looks blue, but you never know.
Yeah, I think that that's a great point. I think that having the right position is important, but having the will and the strategy to put it into effect is important too. And look, we know that Mitch McConnell is likely to still be there. He says that this is one of the forms of legislation that he's going to make it his job to kill. So let's say, best case scenario, a Democrat wins in 2020, they push for the Green New Deal, and hey, what do you know, the Senate's stopping it. What can you do? It's really difficult. We don't have a majority there. What is your reaction going to be if that comes to pass?
Well, we're thinking about the next year right now. Mm-hmm. And we have to acknowledge that a lot of our strategy is relying on having a progressive and climate committed party that is going to be taking over in 2020. But as far as our scope goes here, we are committed to just laying the groundwork for the Green New Deal in the next year. And so our role in this movement is really bridging between protest, between organizing, and between electoral politics to make sure that in 2020 we're going to have done our best effort, and we're going to have done everything we could have done to put leaders in power who aren't taking money from the fossil fuel industry, who believe that we need to hold fossil fuel executives accountable for the damage they have done and the climate denialism they have promoted, for essentially, reversing all of the damage that Trump has done in the past 2 years as it relates to environmental policy and as it relates to jobs and income inequality.
So I also noticed today, I don't know if you saw, but Representative Joe Kennedy III, who's primarying Ed Markey, he tweeted some nice words about Greta Thunberg and what she's been saying. And I saw that the Sunrise Movement Twitter account criticized him, understandably so, because he is primarying co-sponsor the Green New Deal, and he is also fairly heavily invested in fossil fuels himself. I'm assuming that you consider the stance on this issue an actual commitment to passing a Green New Deal to be a deal breaker if they don't have that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's totally fair to say. But at the same time, merely saying you support a Green New Deal doesn't cut it. I think that now so many candidates like Kennedy and like the Democratic presidential candidates we see today support it shows how much momentum we've gained. But at the same time, you have to have the plans that are aggressive and that are ambitious, and not merely plans that are aiming, like Joe Biden, that are aiming to bring down our emissions, but at the same time aren't banning fracking. And it's sort of like having that controversial component there is something that's developed recently, because before we were told that the Green New Deal wouldn't have catapulted in the way that it has. And now that it has, it's like, okay, we have to be looking at these plans tooth and nail, seeing if they actually align with what the original resolution calls for.
I couldn't agree more. I want to ask you one other question. This is a little bit oddball. I want to ask you for advice, because I know that a lot of activists, I've heard this recently, actually, Greta has talked about this at the UN, about the media focusing on individuals in some cases, like focusing on her as an individual, which I know I have been guilty of just because I need something to inspire me to go on in what can be a very dark career. But I'm curious, as a climate activist, what can the media be doing that would actually be helpful to your efforts? What can they do? What perhaps should they not be doing?
I think telling stories is a really powerful way of showing the potential we have to create a better society, to improve the well-being of people these days who work 3 jobs and who are struggling to get by. The story of the Green New Deal in and of itself is a really inspirational story to tell. And it requires some creative component to it, right? Because we don't have the plan actually at the scale anywhere in the world that we can look today. Mm-hmm. So I think definitely focusing on those stories, but then also focusing on personal stories of people who are on the front lines of this crisis, who may not have the time to be advocating for the climate crisis like I do and like Greta does, but who are actually experiencing the effects of it every day, and what sort of emotions does that elicit in the audience. Greta is extremely inspiring, and she is an extremely powerful speaker. But at the same time, it's what's happening. The UN today, they're proposing climate pledges, but they don't actually have any plan to deal with fossil fuel corruption and influence in politics. Yeah. So it's like, how far really is her message going to go if we are, just focusing on how inspiring she is? Like she said, she doesn't want the empathy. She wants to see action. She wants to see plans.
Okay, I appreciate that advice. Gonna do my best here. Zina Prector Rodriguez, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate everything you do.
Thank you, I really appreciate it.